Anything else? I'm going to introduce our next panelists. So we got Chris Georgoulias and Chris Fawcett. They are some top authorities on vintage Star Wars toys, which is our next topic. And they're going to teach you all about the vintage toy lines, Kenner toy line, which is kind of the backbone of Star Wars collecting, and then also cover some of the international distribution of the Kenner toys. So Chris and Chris.
So how many of you out there, when you were a kid, had like every Star Wars toy there was? Anybody? A few hands. How many of you had a friend that insisted he had every single Star Wars toy there was? All right, well, we're going to prove all of you wrong. Because there's a lot of stuff, and hopefully you'll see a lot of stuff here I'm sure you've seen before, but hopefully we'll have some things in this presentation that'll be new and interesting and a little different. So we're going to start at the beginning, and we're going to go through all the kind of US stuff first, and then have a bunch of international stuff near the end.
I'll say, yes, at the beginning, everybody got kind of caught off guard with Star Wars, the popularity. It's pretty well known that Kenner didn't have action figures ready in time for the Christmas following the release of Star Wars in May '77. So that December, they didn't have anything ready, but what they could do is print up paper items. So things that they sold that for Christmas was like puzzles, board games, dip dots, paint sets. There was these Planks poster, like a play paint set. You color these posters. And probably the most famous thing, excuse me, is the early bird certificate package that they dreamed up to allow people to get their Christmas spending money in December, with the promise that they would receive their action figures sometime between February and March, I believe it was, of the following year. So you got this little early bird certificate package from the store. It had a little cardboard tray with a little coupon in it that you sent into Kenner, and at least the kids that Christmas would have their item. And a couple months later, when the production was going, they would receive their first action figures.
I didn't get one of these, but I can only imagine as a kid how disappointing you'd be. Great, you got me a piece of, I wanted a toy, you got me a piece of cardboard.
Yeah.
So here's all the action figures, and one thing that's kind of a question even among collectors still is how many vintage figures are there? And it all depends on how you count. If you go to every single little tiny variation, you can count several hundred. Me personally, I kind of count, you see the 92 here, those are the figures that are shown on the back of the very last of the line, the 92 back line. You can also see down at the bottom there, you have a blue snaggletooth, which is really quite different than the red one. And the yak face figure, which was the very last figure, did not appear in a card back, so that takes us up to 94. The Rebo band isn't shown on the card back, that's there on the bottom left. So that's up to 97. And then the other ones I count are, there's a variation of 3PO, there's the regular version and the removable limbs version, and then there was 3 variants of R2. So if you add in the extra C-3PO and the 2 extra R2s, that gets you to 100. And I'd like to stop there, because 100 is just a nice round number. But there's some other major variations. Some people like to count, like the Vinyl Cape Jawa, and other people don't.
I guess, back, you can see with in the corner what the mailer box looked like for those figures that you get. You get Luke, Leia, Chewbacca, and R2-D2, which is a nice little spread of character types in that early bird set from 1978.
So here's basically the card backs for the vintage line. Unlike today's toys, they basically release the same figure for every movie. They would have an updated one for the new clothing outfits that the characters had, but there are a few figures like Darth Vader, Ben Kenobi, and Chewbacca that were released on every single line of packaging, from Star Wars packaging all the way through to the Power of the Force packaging, which was the very last line that was, the line was kind of dying a little bit after Jedi, and Star Wars was sort of going downhill in pop culture, and they tried to do something interesting with the line and packaged a coin in with it that was collectible. And also in that line they released some figures that had never been released. For example, a Luke Stormtrooper figure, which was obviously from the first movie, had never been released during the first movie time, and so there were figures like that that were included in this very, very last line.
Okay, so everybody, the favorite toy line that they love to hate, the Droids and Ewoks lines. This line came out in '85 and '86 based on the Saturday morning cartoons, the Ewoks cartoons and the Droids cartoons. And there were 12 Droids figures and 6 Ewoks figures. And it's a direct carryover from the Star Wars line because the Boba Fett figure and the A-Wing pilot are the exact same figures that were released in the Star Wars line. And R2 and C-3PO with the same tooling, they just made it a little cartoony, and then you fill in with the other figures, and then sort of by default, because the Ewoks is related to that, it all sort of goes together, and it's sort of tail end of the U.S. line. And they also included the coins, as you can see, that they had gold-tinted coins for the Droids and bronze-tinted coins or copper-tinted coins for the Ewoks line. So there's still that tie-in also. So it's personal preference, and people collect. It's not directly related to the trilogy, but since a lot of people collect Kenner stuff specifically, it's directly related to that, the movie trilogy figures.
And the only one really here worth much of collector's interest really is, of course, the Boba Fett figure, and that's a pretty hard to find and pretty pricey figure. We should mention too what is officially vintage, and the common demarcation for that is 1977 to 1987. This line was 89. I'm sorry, 89. There were a few toys released internationally we'll get to that actually were put out after this line. This was sort of the last hurrah for Kenner in the United States.
First Star Wars playsets with everybody's favorite Death Star space station. You can't go wrong with that set. It's got so many features. It's just incredible. And then probably one of the more sought after ones is the Cantina Adventure set. Again, a piece of just a cardboard playset and a way to sell 4 action figures. That was only available through Sears, and it came with the infamous blue snaggletooth figure. And Kenner had produced these figures and packaged them up and sold them, but realized later on they didn't that snaggletooth was incorrect, and they changed it to a short red version. So this play set and the catalog mailer was the only way to actually get that blue snaggletooth figure. But they made gazillions of them. They've been rare, but they've been available every day since I've been collecting for 20 years. So there's millions out there. So.
Yeah, and speaking of rarity, you always hear about these people that are saving all these toys they had from their kid, and they're going to put their kid through college or whatever. There are some rare ones like the blue snaggletooth and the yak face, but even those, understand, nobody knows for sure exactly how many figures Kenner made, but the estimates are somewhere in the 200 to 300 million figures. So really none of these, anything that was production, especially U.S. production, is really not rare at all. Here's some play sets for Empire. On the upper left there, we have another one of those just really simple ones with a cardboard backdrop, and also the Cloud City one in the middle. That was Sears also.
Cloud City playset was Sears. Actually, the Rebel Command Center was a JCPenney exclusive, and they reused the base from the Land of the Jawas playset that we showed just earlier. And they used that base again for the Hoth Ice Planet you see on the other side. So there's another cardboard, cheap backdrop, reused tooling, so they're able to sort of sell the same thing over and over.
And I always thought the Darth Vader Star Destroyer was just a really weird toy. I mean, does that look anything like a Star Destroyer? And the Dagobah playset was always one of my favorites as a kid, but they're almost impossible to find today because the swamp there that you see R2 sinking in was this foamy stuff, and it just tends to crumble to dust now. So if you find one with the foam, don't touch the foam, because if you touch it, it'll be gone.
But there are guys that make reproduction foam, so if you need foam, check eBay.
So here's some Jedi play sets. The Ewok Village and the Jabba the Hutt. Jabba the Hutt's kind of, sometimes people call it a creature or a playset. It's kind of something in between. The Jabba the Hutt dungeon is a reused droid factory from the original Star Wars line. And there were 2 variations of that. One of them came with Return of the Jedi figures, Klaatu, Nikto, and 88. That's on the top there. And the much harder to find one came with 3 of the Power of the Force line of figures, EV-99, and Amanaman, and Barada. And that one's much more sought after, just because the Power of the Force line in general is more sought after. Because at that time, like I said earlier, the line was sort of dying, and not nearly as many of those were produced and sold. So now, years later, they're a little harder to find, and a lot of people didn't have them as a kid. So I know when I started collecting, I had never even seen the Power of the Force figures because I had quit as a kid before they came out. So it was kind of like this whole new realm for me. So I really enjoyed collecting that line.
Yeah, so the vehicles now. The Millennium Falcon had many features, most like the Death Star. That was their primary toy ship for the line, and then you see they released the Land Speeder X-wing. The Imperial Troop Transporter was a neat one. It had 6 different voice recordings and sound effects. That had the little tiny record inside this mechanism that was battery powered, and you clicked on it, and the needle would jump to the different track, and it would play a record. So it's kind of cool, old school technology there. All these vehicles, they had like a single little light at the front, and the buzzing sound was it's just simply a little electric motor with a little gear wheel and a piece of plastic, much like you'd stick a baseball card in the spokes of your tire, in your bicycle, in your spokes. That's how those things made the noise. And if you ever have a ship that when it doesn't want to make the noise anymore, all you have to do is open it up and kind of spin that motor with your finger a little bit, and usually that frees it up, and then it'll work.
And the Empire Strikes Back line, of course, the most envious toy, I never had it when I was a kid, was the AT-AT, and that was just pretty big toy, kind of expensive, which is probably why a lot of people didn't have it. And then you see some of the other ships there. The Imperial Cruiser now in the Empire Strikes Back line, they actually ditched the whole recording thing. I don't know if it's too expensive or they're having trouble with that. But so the Empire version of that is the exact same toy, but just without the sound effects.
Yeah, that was a Sears version like this, and I think it was to make a lower price point toy. They put some stickers on the side. But there was an interesting story that the twin pod cloud car, I've met with various Kenner guys, and they themselves joked, and when they saw that and they were selling that, they realized they could sell anything with Star Wars on it. They could not believe that people would buy that ship that you never even saw. So it's a testament to the power of the kids.
Here's some Return of the Jedi. The Imperial Shuttle was great. It's huge if you've ever seen one in person, and just a great toy. I don't think they sold a lot of those. That was released later in the Jedi line, and it was definitely dying down. Oddly enough, the Y-Wing is seen here, even though the Y-Wing is featured much more predominantly in A New Hope. They just never got around to making it, I guess, until Return of the Jedi. And then to update, they wanted to keep selling the X-Wing and the TIE Fighter, but they sold it, for now 6 years. So they updated that by just changing the stickers and putting battle damage stickers on it now. And I think they're slightly different colors too.
Yeah, plastics.
Slightly different colors. These are some of the probably hardest to find of the vehicles, especially the A-Wing fighter is pretty sought after. But again, these are all production, so when I say hard to find, keep that in mind. Any production thing is available, and you can find these on eBay. But hard to find really means they're a little bit pricier than maybe some of the other things. And then the Tatooine skiff is a pretty rare toy and pretty sought after. They were going to actually release the A-Wing in the Power of the Force packaging, and the skiff in the Droids packaging also, and those toys got all the way through some box concepts, but they never did release them in those alternate packagings.
Yeah, and you can see now the A-Wing, again, that crossover I mentioned between the Droids, the cartoon line, and the Kenner cartoon line. I mean, that's distinctly a Kenner. It was going to be a Power of the Force ship, so some people, they do cross over there and they want the A-Wing in their collection, so you have to get it in the Droids box.
One concept, and this speaks back to Chris's thought from the Kenner guys, if we can sell anything if we put Star Wars on it. These mini rigs were just some idea of a toy designer that said, hey, we need a lower price point thing. These ships are, whatever they were back then, $10 or $15, and the figures are $1 or $2. We don't have anything in between. So they wanted to come up with a whole line of sort of this low-priced vehicle line. So they came up with this idea of these vehicles that could have been just off-screen, but were never actually on the screen, but were, maybe some ancillary in the Star Wars universe. So they just made up these things, and the one I like